Hey guys, welcome back to the Kingdom Vision podcast. Matt Parker here for week 13 or episode 13. Um, just wanted to jump on real quick today. I'm running a little behind on our recording, but did want to pump something out today. We're in week 13 talking about spiritual conflict and spiritual warfare, that sort of thing. It was an interesting week for me as a read. I mean, I grew up in a world where we talked about the Holy Spirit, they talked about demons, we talked about stuff like that, um, but not so much in the what we would have termed in the day of the charismatic deliverance type world. But really, the focus of this week was to kind of bring into focus to not be redundant, but to bring into focus the reality of what's going on in the world and in the heavenly realms and in our realm, as it were, the seen and the unseen, and to bring some clarity to it, to bring some sobriety to it. I think there sometimes we get people either get out on. We've talked about this all week. We're going to talk about it next week a little bit. People get out on the fringe of hyperfixation where there's a demon behind every tree and we've got to be marching down the streets rebuking everybody, or we swing to the other side where we just don't think about it at all. And one of the things that we wanted to drill into this week and to kind of make sure that we brought up and talked about was that spiritual conflict is real. It is a thing, but it doesn't mean that God's absent and he's not pulled back from it. I know one of the passages in Daniel was one of my really, I think, a cool and one of my favorite stories because it pulls the curtain back on kind of what's happening. And Daniel was praying, for 3 weeks. He's mourning, he's praying, and this angel was coming, and it took him a while to get there. I think it was, like I said, 21 days or something like that. And it took him a little while to get there because the Prince of Persia, stopped him and they had conflict. And in fact, it says that the Prince of Greece is coming back. And so why is that a big deal? Well, it actually just gives us context and supports the idea that we talked about earlier, where the nations are disinherited after Babel and that they were placed under the rule and the reign of these spiritual beings. We would call them angelic beings, but angel is really more of a job title than it is a statement of something's ontology or its being and what it is. It's a job title. So a spiritual being is an angel if they're carrying a messenger, because that's what an angel is a messenger. But that's why we have different words for these divine creatures. We have cherubim and seraphim. You have angel, demon, and we have just kind of adopted in our vernacular. Angels are the good spirit beings. Demons are the bad ones. That's not wrong. It's a little bit oversimplified. And so what we learned was that there seems to be territorial, governance, as it were, or leadership over the nations and things. Like I said, it's a very real thing. But if we wanted to just pull back and remember that just because it is true, that God is the one that's still in control. This is a thing that's going to come up next week in week 14, that it's still God. It's still Jesus. We talk about in Mark 1 where Jesus steps into this contested place. We got this demonized man, this demon possessed man that shows up in the synagogue. And he's railing against everybody. Well, Jesus rebukes the demon. And people will say, oh, look, there you go. There's instance for, rebuke. And some people would say that, only Jesus can do that. But we also see the apostles doing it, and they were, given the power to do that, the authority over the spirits. We see that when the 70 went out and came back. And so that's there. But we also see in the battle over Moses's body, even the archangel Michael, when he's battling with Satan, he doesn't rebuke Satan. He says, the Lord rebuke you. And, there's kind of, some theologians would say that there's this difference in the hierarchy, that there's these territorial, I would say more powerful beings maybe, that's not really our place. That's not really our sphere of battle. In that even Michael says, "Hey, the Lord rebuke you." He wouldn't dare, go into that with them. Although I don't know what a spiritual battle would look like for them in that realm, like we saw in Daniel 10. I don't know. Uh, One of these days, I suppose that we'll find out, or we'll just know, or something. But the point of that is that God's not absent in all this. It's not like he's like, oh dang, I can't stop the battle. Oh no, it's out of control. It's just the reality of what's happening. It's the way that he set up the world to work after the fall, and he gave some authority, and it got corrupted, and now we're in this mess that he's redeeming. And so it's one of those things that it's just be aware of, but it's nothing to be afraid of. It's people get spooked out. Oh, there might be a demon on this or a demon on that, and we have the authority given to us by Christ. Matthew 28, Jesus said all authority was given to him, and we see that he sent the apostles out under that authority, and so we don't stand in any danger. That doesn't mean that they're not coming at us. It doesn't mean they don't disrupt their lives. They're not a nuisance. I mean, even the apostle Paul, we talk about the thorn in his flesh, and everybody wants to talk about, was it his blindness? Was it this? Was it that? Was it, was he sick? If you read the text carefully, it says that there was a spirit sent to him to buffet him, to irritate him, and he asked for it to be removed, and it wasn't. So his thorn in the flesh was actually a spiritual attack that was disrupting his life, and he had to learn to live with it, because the response was, no, I'm not going to take it away. My grace is sufficient. And I'm like, okay, there we go. You just got to deal with it. The second thing that I wanted to mention today before we get off of here was that, again, the right response to understanding this reality of the seen and the unseen, the demonic realm and this, our realm, is not obsession. It's not fear, but it's to trust and just have readiness and to be ready in worship. My buddy Josh Otten recorded a song years back that he wrote called "He Is Greater." And before all of creation, during all of creation, before Babel, before the rebellions, during the rebellions, after the rebellions, God is greater. He's still greater. He has been greater. He's always has been, always will be. He's bigger and better and greater than any conflict, than any of the attack that may come, any demonic force. And we walk around with his name. We're not walking around this earth under Satan's authority. Job 1 was a good picture of what's going on in the spiritual realm, because it was God's idea to say, I don't want you to consider Job. And Satan was like, I can't. I can't do anything with him because you've protected him. He had to have permission to go after Job. He had to have some protection lifted. So I wanted to just recap this week. And again, this whole devotion is about understanding the story that we're in and understanding what's real versus what is perceived or what we think things are. And the way that we've kind of told our stories in the last 50 to 100 years don't always bring up and incorporate this supernatural part. It's not that we've necessarily pushed it aside and, we don't want to talk about those things. I guess that's true in some pockets, but it's more of a sense of we just don't consider it to be an integral part of the story that we're living today. It's kind of this part of church that we relegate to. It's not real everyday life. But these passages that we talked about this week remind us, no, it is part of everyday life. It is the reality that we live in. But there's no need to be afraid. There's no need to obsess over it and go around rebuking, every squirrel that runs in front of your car on the highway or anything like that. But when it does come, when that conflict comes and it comes to your life, it's okay to stand in the authority of God. And part of it is what, God said to Paul, hey, my grace is sufficient for you. You're going to have trouble in this present world, Paul told Timothy. It's just, and Jesus told the disciples, they hated me. They're going to hate you. They're going to come after you. It's part of it. And that's not just a temporal thing. That's happening in the spiritual world as well. But one day, Jesus is coming back. The judgment of God will come, and it will be righteous and right, and everything will be set back in the order that it was supposed to be for us to live in eternity, for the rest of eternity, here in the new heaven and the new earth, coming and going out of the New Jerusalem. And that'll be a time that I'm looking forward to. I appreciate you being with us today. Thanks a lot for joining us on this little podcast that we had today. And remember, there's no need to be afraid. God is still in control, and we walk and we live in his authority. You guys have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week on the Kingdom Vision Podcast. Talk to you later.